My name is Elijah Grant. I'm 32 now. But the day everything changed, I was just a quiet, awkward 11-year-old kid, holding a half-empty soda bottle, standing alone on a train platform I didn't recognize. It was supposed to be a family day trip, nothing fancy, just a ride into the city and back. My parents always said we needed to toughen up, so they liked to turn everything into some twisted form of character building. That day, it became something darker. We were laughing. Well, they were laughing when they nudged me toward the station bench and told me to sit. "Be right back," Dad said, jingling the car keys like a game show host. "We're just going to grab something. Stay put." I remember blinking up at them, confused but obedient. They turned and walked off together, still chuckling. I waited. 10 minutes, 15, then 45. The joke, apparently, was that I had to figure it out. At first, I thought they were watching me from somewhere behind a tree from the parking lot, maybe hiding and giggling about my confused face. So I didn't panic. Not right away. But the sun began to drop, and my soda was warm now. My backpack felt heavier. I remember walking to the ticket counter and asking the man behind the glass, "Have you seen my parents?" He just shook his head and asked if I needed help calling someone. I still remember that feeling in my chest, like gravity doubling in real time, like I had done something wrong by trusting them. I sat back down on that bench, staring at the road they drove away on. I waited for hours, and slowly it dawned on me. No one was coming back. My parents had left me behind. Not by accident, not out of crisis. On purpose. As a joke, like I was a puppy, they dropped off to see if it found its way home. I did get home. Eventually, I walked to a nearby store, used their phone and called my uncle. He picked me up, confused and angry. But when my parents finally showed up, hours later, laughing like teenagers after a prank, all they said was, "You made it. See? You're fine." My uncle didn't laugh. He just drove me home. In silence, and in that silence, something inside me cracked and started growing into something harder. That was the first time I realized love could come with conditions, and that sometimes the people who raise you are not the people who protect you. After that day, something shifted inside me, not in an obvious outward kind of way. I still went to school, still cleaned my room, still answered when they called my name, but inside, I stopped waiting for their approval. I stopped expecting comfort. Trust had been severed in a quiet, surgical way. I realized that being their child didn't mean I'd be protected. It meant I was part of a performance they could control and humiliate whenever they felt like it. For weeks, my father retold the story at barbecues and gatherings like it was some rite of passage. "You should have seen the kid's face," he'd roar. "Thought we really left him." Everyone laughed, except my uncle. He watched me carefully every time. He was the only adult who pulled me aside later and said, "That wasn't okay." I didn't say anything in return. I just nodded. I didn't have the words yet. But I never forgot that moment. It was the first time someone really saw me, and didn't turn it into a punchline. The hardest part wasn't being left behind. It was coming home and being told it meant nothing. That my fear was overreacting. That their absence was a life lesson I should be thankful for. It warped my sense of safety. I started planning everything, mapping every route, knowing every exit. I didn't care if it was a grocery store or a birthday party. I always had a backup plan to get home. I never wanted to be at anyone's mercy again. By age 14, I stopped asking them for rides. I worked after-school jobs, saved for a used bike, then later bought my own bus pass. Independence became my only safety net. People thought I was mature for my age, but it wasn't maturity, it was survival. Because once you've been abandoned by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, You learn to build your own ground beneath your feet. My mother tried to soften things over the years. We were just trying to teach you to be strong, she'd say. You're so responsible now. See? It worked. But all I heard was, see how well you turned out without us having to actually care. I didn't argue. I just nodded. It was easier to let them believe their fantasy than to make them face what they'd really done. And quietly, I made myself a promise. One day, I'd build a life so secure, so stable, that no one could ever leave me stranded again. Not emotionally, not financially, not physically. I wasn't just going to survive them, I was going to outgrow them. I didn't tell anyone how often I replayed that train station in my head, how the image of my parents walking away never really stopped echoing. But instead of letting it haunt me, I used it. I used that memory like fuel. I became obsessed with self-reliance. Every minute of every day had purpose. While my classmates partied, I studied. While others drifted, I made plans. And not because I was chasing success. I was chasing distance from them, from dependence, from ever needing to be rescued again. By the time I was 17, I had 3 part-time jobs and a growing savings account, not because I wanted money, but because I needed options. My parents didn't notice, or maybe they didn't care. They thought I was just naturally driven. The irony was painful. They thought they made me strong, but it was the pain of being invisible that forged the foundation I was building. Quiet, focused, unbreakable. College was my first true escape. I didn't ask for help. I applied for every scholarship I could find, took out loans, worked nights and weekends. The day I packed my bags, my father patted me on the back and said, "Told you that joke would toughen you up." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. As I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt no sadness, only determination. The farther I got, the lighter I felt. In college, I didn't just study business. I studied people. I watched how real leaders carried themselves, how they earned trust, how they lifted others, how they showed up. And I made a vow when I had my own company, my own team, my own family, I would never disappear when it mattered. I would never turn someone's vulnerability into entertainment. I would never become what they were. After graduation, I got a corporate job, climbed fast, saved faster. I didn't tell anyone back home how well I was doing. I didn't owe them that part of my story. I started building something on the side, a small logistics startup with a friend I trusted like a brother. We ran it from a shared apartment and used every spare dollar to grow it, slowly, carefully, silently. Because while some people build empires for power, I was building mine for safety, for freedom, for the boy they left behind on that cold metal bench. It was a rainy Thursday when I got the call. I hadn't spoken to my parents in almost 4 years, just the occasional forwarded Christmas email or stiff birthday text. But this time, it was different. My mother's voice on the other end of the line was fragile, almost foreign. "Elijah," she said, "we're in a bit of trouble." I waited. She didn't ask how I was, didn't acknowledge the years of silence. Just jumped into it. My father had made a series of bad financial decisions. They were close to losing the house. For a few seconds I said nothing. I just let the quiet speak for me. The same kind of silence I sat in at that train station, alone, waiting. It was strange hearing desperation from someone who once thought abandonment was a joke. I asked her if they had a plan. She said they were hoping I could help. I didn't laugh. I didn't raise my voice. I simply asked her to send me the details, and I hung up. My company was doing well, better than well. We had just landed a major contract, and for the first time our revenue hit a point where I could walk away from corporate forever. I had done it. Built the life I once dreamed of, brick by quiet brick. But that call, Their call opened something up in me I wasn't expecting. Not pity, not love, but curiosity. Would they recognize the man they once left behind? A week later, I flew out and drove straight to the bank that held their mortgage. I didn't call them. I didn't visit the house. I sat with the loan officer, reviewed the debt, and paid it in full, in cash. No name attached, no paper trail to me. I wanted no thanks, no reconciliation, just silence and closure. I didn't save them to prove anything. I did it so they could never say I became cruel like them, so they could never twist my absence into revenge. Then I booked a hotel downtown for the night, one I had invested in quietly years ago. I sat on the balcony, watching the city breathe beneath me and let it sink in. I was no longer the boy who waited for a ride home. I was home. Everywhere I stood, everywhere I went, was now a place I had created on my own terms. They never found out it was me who paid off the house, or if they did, they never asked. Maybe deep down they knew, but the truth is, I didn't need them to know. I didn't want them to, because the most powerful kind of redemption doesn't beg to be seen. A few months after clearing their debt, I got another call. This time it wasn't my mother. It was my uncle, the same one who had picked me up from that train station all those years ago. His voice was firm, but kind. "They want to see you," he said. "They've been asking questions." I told him I had nothing to say. He was quiet for a moment before replying, "Maybe you don't, but maybe they finally do." I agreed to meet them, not because I wanted to reconnect, but because part of me wanted to see if they had changed. If even a flicker of remorse had carved its way into the walls they built between us. We met at a neutral place, a small diner on the outskirts of town. No cameras, no audience, just the three of us, sitting in a booth that smelled like syrup and dusted leather. My father looked older, smaller, even. My mother's eyes didn't carry the same fire. They both looked weathered. We talked about the usual things at first. Work, the weather, distant relatives. Then my mother said it. "We heard someone paid off the mortgage." I nodded slowly. "Good for you," my father said. Whoever it was, there was a beat of silence. No thanks, no admission, just the same hollow pride they'd always clung to. I smiled. It didn't hurt this time. I realized I had outgrown needing their validation entirely. Then my mother reached across the table and said something I didn't expect. "We didn't know how badly we hurt you back then." Her voice cracked. "We thought it was funny, a lesson. We were wrong." I let her words sit there between us. For once she didn't rush to justify, didn't wrap her cruelty in a bow of nostalgia. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest thing I'd ever get. I stood up to leave. My father said, "You turned out fine, didn't you?" I paused, turned to him, and answered without flinching, "I turned out despite you." Then I walked out. Not angry, not broken, just free. They had finally seen me, and I no longer needed anything from them. Not money, not love, not understanding, just distance, and I already had that. Back in my car, I sat for a while, watching the sun set over the town I once thought I'd never escape. I realized then, the most powerful moments in life don't come with applause. They come with silence, and a deep knowing that you've healed what they never even tried to fix. I never returned to that diner, never visited the house again. But something shifted after that meeting, not in them but in me. I stopped carrying the weight of their absence. The questions, the silent ache of wondering why love felt more like a test than a shelter. I didn't need to understand them anymore. I had built something better than their approval. I had built a life where no one could strand me at a station again, not emotionally, not spiritually, not ever. My company kept growing. We opened offices in 2 more cities. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, especially those who came from fractured homes like I had. I never shared my full story publicly, but in every meeting, every conversation, I planted something deeper than strategy. I planted dignity, because I knew what it meant to start with nothing but pain. And I wanted them to know you can build from that too. Years passed. Every once in a while I'd receive a card, a birthday message, a holiday text from my parents, short and polite. I responded. Sometimes I didn't. And that was the beauty of it. I had choice, control, boundaries. I no longer needed to prove anything. I wasn't that boy on the bench anymore, waiting for love to circle back around. I was the man who picked himself up, walked alone and built the road beneath his feet. There's a photo in my office now. It's not of them. It's of that train station bench. I went back once, alone, and took the photo myself, not to relive the pain, but to honor the beginning. Because that bench, cold and forgotten, wasn't the end of something. It was the start of a life that would be designed, not inherited, lived, not reacted to. I often wonder if my parents know just how deeply that moment shaped me. If they know the man I became was forged not by their presence but by their absence. And if they do, I hope they sit with that the way I once sat alone, wondering if I mattered. But I don't wait for that anymore. I live, I love, I give people what I never had: security, belief, respect. And in doing so, I've become the kind of man who never walks away when someone is scared, lost, or unseen. Because once I was the boy no one came back for. Now, I am the man no one can take down. I decided long ago that I wouldn't let bitterness write my story. There's no glory in staying angry forever, not when you've fought so hard for peace. The train station bench may have been where they left me, but it's also where I found the truth. The people who break you don't get to define you. That power is yours. And I took it back step by silent step. I eventually turned my company into something more than just profit. We built outreach programs for kids in unstable homes. We sponsored emergency transport cards for stranded youth. We helped teenagers get home safely, something I never forgot the importance of. I never told them why I did it. I didn't need applause. I just wanted to make sure no one else sat on a bench wondering if love was just a game their parents played. One year, I was invited to speak at a youth conference. I stood in front of a sea of faces, many of them hardened by abandonment, neglect, or doubt. I shared pieces of my story, not the names, not the anger, but the journey, the bench, the walk home, the decision to become what I never had. And when I finished, one boy came up to me and asked, "How did you not hate them?" I looked him in the eyes and told him, because hating them would have meant they still controlled me. I don't think my parents will ever fully understand what they did. Maybe that's the burden they carry now, or maybe they've rewritten the story in their minds to make themselves the heroes. That's fine. I'm not here to change their version. I'm here living mine, and mine is full of peace, purpose, power that doesn't need to prove itself anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I revisit that train station. Not physically, just in my mind. I see the boy sitting there, afraid, confused, forgotten. And I imagine walking up beside him. I don't say much, I just sit next to him, quiet, present, steady, because that's what he needed. Not rescue, not revenge, just someone who stayed. And now, I am that someone. For others, for myself, forever. Because they left me behind, but I never left myself.